Children, we have already learnt about the First World War and the Second World War. And we also know how much did the world suffer because of these two wars. Economically, nations became poor. Lakhs of people died in the war. Lakhs of people, they were injured. They needed hospitals, health assistance, and these countries which had got pounded, they all had to develop. There was no money for that. Dearth of capital had been a major reason, an impediment for the countries to develop further. The situation was horrible at the end of the Second World War. Atomic bombs were used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this world, entire world, was made to suffer beyond all limits by the Second World War. It's a big question, who won the war and who lost it. Even those countries which won the war, they too, they were crushed. They were crushed. Their development came to a halt. So a lot of hurdles came and stood on the way of development, progress and development of the world. 1945 the war ended, 1939 to 1945. With the bombardment of Japan by USA, the war came to a close. It was during the first week of August that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombarded by the American planes. The two cities got smashed. The war came to an end. Hitler committed suicide. Germany surrendered. And Germany was divided into 4 parts by the Allied forces. One part went to Russia, one part to Britain, one part to France, one part to USA. Ultimately, Britain, France and USA come together and bring those 3 parts together and make it West Germany. The part which remained with USSR, it became East Germany. And a wall was built in between East Germany and West Germany. Communists did not want any interference by the Western forces. There's a big gulf between the Soviet Union and all the Western forces. Now, with the war coming to a close in 1945, most of the countries of the world felt a need to come together, form a world association, global association of countries with a major object of averting any further war in this world. How painful the wars are, the countries had understood beyond any doubt. So what was the need of the hour? The need of the hour was peace. Peace should get maintained. P-E-A-C-E. Peace should get maintained all over the world. So the countries had to come together. They should have an understanding. They should put an end to the arms race. They did not want any war to take place in future. About 20 odd countries came together, discussed a lot, and ultimately in October, 24th of October, the United Nations organization got formed. 24th October 1945. Even today, we observe that day as the UN Day, United Nations Day. We celebrate that day. So with the beginning of the United Nations organization, a new era, a new yuga started in the world. Era means yuga. It's a different world now. The post Second World War period saw a different global association. Countries came together. Everyone was speaking of peace, tranquility, and progress, economic progress. So, what were the problems that the world was facing? In a gist, if you have to tell, one, human rights. Even a country like India was getting exploited by Britain. The British never understood the wrong footing of their country. A country which had no connection with Britain had been seized. They had got it colonized. They were exploiting the people here. People did not have human rights even. India suffered under British colonialism for a very long period. So Indians had started raising the slogan, "Quit India, we will rule our country ourselves." 1942, quit India. So as the World War ended, the Indian freedom movement had reached the apical point. There's no doubt that India was going to become free under the British. The British would give freedom to India. So human rights were a big question mark everywhere. People were being treated like slaves everywhere. The World War saw most of the world under the control of the colonial and imperial forces. Countries like Spain, France, Britain, Russia, Germany, Italy, America, each one wanted to expand their territory, take into their control as much area as possible and rule it, exploit the people there. But now the things stood changed. People were against colonialism. Having a few colonial slaves under you, slave countries under you, exploiting them is what is known as colonialism. India was suffering under Britain. Britain was the colonial power. So entire land of India was under the control of the British Queen. On similar lines, France had its colonies. Germany had its colonies. Portugal had its colonies. Holland had its colonies. Russia had tried to expand itself. So the picture of the entire world was one wherein there were a few colonial powers and the rest of the countries were suffering under their clutches. So arms race had to come to a halt. In the name of war, countries had amassed weapons of mass destruction. And it got proved when Hiroshima and Nagasaki got pounded by atomic bombs. It had to come to a close. Terrorism was there everywhere. These terrorists and governments, they terrorize others and try to keep them under their control. Economic inequality, I told you many countries have become very poor. A few countries were rich and other countries were all poor. So there was economic inequality between one country and the other. India was facing the worst form of poverty here in the country. The worst form. It was not the case of just India. There were hundreds of countries in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, which were all under these colonial powers of Europe. So, a full stop had to be put to this challenge. So, India was striving its best. Added to that, the superiority of the whites. People had become slaves under their hold. Africa was an example. In Africa, people were being made to suffer like anything. They were torturing Africans. They were being treated like animals. The Europeans never tried to share wealth with them. They did not have health facilities. They were running short of food. They had to stay outside the urban areas, outside the city limits. Only to serve the British, they had to come inside. And they had to again move back. This was what is called as apartheid. Apartheid. The white superiority. The notion that the whites, the Europeans are superior to all other races in the world. The blacks in the world. Blacks are to suffer. Blacks are born to serve the British, serve the Europeans. This white superiority, that thinking, blacks have to be slaves, this had spread like wildfire. So the world had to fight against the apartheid. Now these were all the challenges that the world had to face. Human rights were being denied everywhere. What do you understand by it? No education to people other than Europeans, no education to them, no social facility, no socialization, no health facility, no educational facility. What does it mean? The blacks are not empowered to live a respectful life. There is no respect for human beings. So denial of human rights was posing a big problem everywhere. So every human being in the world has to get his or her rights. History of human civilization, if you go through, you see denial of rights right from beginning. That feeling of equality did not occupy the prime place at any time. So throughout, people were being denied their rights. So human rights have to be restored now. Now these discrimination between one community and the other, or among different castes, religions, races, gender, man versus woman. Woman did not occupy a place of pride at all. Man was superior. Woman was not being permitted to participate in any of the social activities. So she was being suppressed. Then color of the skin, apartheid, I told you. Then nationalism, nations feeling that their nation is superior to other nations. See, in 1776, we had American War of Independence. America tried to become free. So the American War of Independence brought freedom to the blacks of America. The blacks played a major role there. And Europeans lost their control on America. But America had been inhabited by the whites. But the whites and blacks, they fought over years and ultimately they got their self-government. It was built on the foundation that blacks and whites are equal. They have equal rights. Following that came the French Revolution. The king and the queen and the relations of the king and queen, they were all beheaded. Guillotines were set up. They had to lose their heads. And ordinary people took over the government. They started ruling the country. That was French Revolution. A big revolution, bloody revolution in the world. The French Revolution. That was in 1789. Then Russian Revolution. Again, the have-nots, the farmers, the laborers fought against the czars. And the former, they were successful. The Tsar kings lost power. They were killed. So the labor force in the country and farmers, they took over power. They got power into their hands, and Lenin was the first one to establish the government. Then comes the freedom of many other countries which were suffering under the Europeans. One of the countries, such countries, was India. India had got colonized. Freedom struggle of India and many other countries in Asia, Africa and Latin America. All these came next, one by one, one by one. And the general opinion all over was that no country should exercise its superiority on another nation. They should not exploit another nation. Imperialism, taking over other countries for your own benefit, that was totally, it came under fire everywhere. And India became free in 1947. And in 1948, on the 10th of December, Human Rights Declaration was made. Human Rights Declaration was made in the United Nations. In detail, the situation in the world was explained, and it was made clear that all people are equal. Even today, we observe December 10th as Human Rights Day. In India too, we observe 10th of December is Human Rights Day. We assert once again on equality of human beings. All are equal. So experts all over the world, they sat together, drafted the policy, and the policy became an act of the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948. The General Assembly mandated all its members to adopt human rights. The General Assembly of the United Nations, is all the member countries will have their membership there. There it was asserted that human rights become the key issue of the world. Human rights will have to be restored. In the First and Second World War, human rights had been thrown into air. They have to be restored. So guidelines were set. What are the guidelines? Live with freedom. Every human being should be free. He should not be in shackles. Live with dignity and equality. Every human being should have dignity. Eradication of slavery. Slavery has to get eradicated. No one can be kept as a slave. No country can be kept as a slave country under another power. Then eradication of exploitation of women. Women can't be exploited. Women can come to the forefront and take up the kind of life they would like to take up. They were free to adopt. So eradication of exploitation of women was also a part of the human rights. Then the world had to go a long way for getting everything executed properly. Then the Indian Constitution. We got our Indian Constitution framed in 1950. In part 3 of our Constitution, Part 3 of our Constitution, Articles from 12 to 35. Articles 12 to 35, they explain the fundamental rights of people. They explain what do you mean by human equality. UN conference was held in 1966 on human rights. Again, commitment as the part of member nations for the compulsory implementation of human rights was the major aspect discussed in the 1966 Human Rights Conference, UN Conference. All the member countries have to exercise and see that human rights are given to each and every man or woman in the country. Everyone should enjoy human rights. So, state and national commissions were formed in each of the countries to pave way for the execution of human rights. National commissions were formed. In India, we formed a commission for the upliftment of the scheduled castes. We had a separate commission to discuss about the scheduled tribes and their upliftment. They were people who had a large share in our population, but they did not have the freedom at all. They did not have the dignity of labor. Women's Commission was formed to find out the problems of women and overcome those problems. Then Backward Classes Commission was formed for all those who are considered as backward in the country economically and socially. So their case was also taken up, and United Nations came out with International Human Rights Commission. A commission was appointed to look after, to supervise the functioning of different states from this angle. How do they execute? How do they overcome the barriers? Now we come to arms race. With the Second World War coming to a close, the USSR and USA, these two became the leading countries of the world, two leading countries. And USA started developing a lot of suspicion about USSR. It thought USSR is building up its forces. USSR thought USA is an imperialistic country, capitalistic country. They will do harm to the world if left alone. So there was a fight between USA and USSR continuously. It was a cold fight. There is no open war. But all the time, both these countries were suspicious of each other. They had started spying on each other. USSR built up its forces and went on a huge arms race, thinking that USA may outbeat USSR. USA again the same thing. It had suspicion about USSR, and USA went on building up its military hold. And they started bringing other countries who had goodwill about USSR under their umbrella and forming a kind of union, their own union, with an assurance to help each other in case there is any threat from the other bloc. In case there is any threat from the other bloc, these countries have to come together and fight. Same thing happened in the Russian bloc too. See, in the nuclear approach, nuclear world, if we do not end the arms race, if we do not put a hold on nuclear armaments, those nuclear arms will take us. If we don't put an end to the atomic and hydrogen bombs, the atomic and hydrogen bombs will see that human civilization is nullified. It's the truth. So the world had to fight against that. Arms race is always a dangerous phenomenon. Once a country starts militarizing, there's no end to it. There's no end. You want to be superior. You want to have control. You have to maintain your boundaries. For all these you need arms. You need military. But if it is from the angle of controlling the entire world, then it's a very dangerous phenomenon. Now we see it in the form of the kind of suspicion that China has about the world and the suspicion of the world, countries of the world about China. That is the present threat, current threat. Okay, so what is the way out? The way out is disarmament. The nuclear stockpile. You have hundreds and hundreds of bombs which you have made and you have kept in your stockpile. You have to get them disintegrated. You have to destroy them. Even destroying the nuclear bombs you have, it's a major job. It's not that easy. America had to destroy the bombs it has. Russia had to destroy. But practically it won't be possible. They won't do it. So, to some extent this has happened. This is called as disarmament. You give up the arms you have. You bring down your military. For that, USA and USSR they should have meetings. They should have understanding. They should have an agreement. They should put everything on paper. It has to be got signed. United Nations has to be kept informed about that. They will supervise and the arms race has to be brought under control. So, these were viable options. Viable options. Sit together, discuss, be cool, have cool discussions and see that what best you can do to cut down the arms race. The arms race, if it happens in any part of the world, between any two powers, nations, it results in insecurity. All the time you keep feeling that you are insecure. Your opposing nation might have piled up more arms than what you have. In case there is a war, you should not lose. You should not lose your territory. So insecurity, fear, all the time you will be fearing. You are afraid of other nations. You don't feel secure. Then instability. With this what happens? There will be skirmishes, border fights, and there will be insecurity and instability. The border areas especially, they will be very weak. Because of the military strength of both the countries, those areas become very weak. Then threat of war. Any time a war may get declared, you should be in a prepared state. And a war getting declared will have its own effect on the economic development of the country. So, wastage of money. Once you have war, you have to spend huge amounts of money on war. It's a wastage of money on arms and ammunition. Even if you don't have a war, even then for the stockpile you have developed, you have to spend a huge quantum of money. So, the efforts of the laborers, that gets wasted. Efforts of the farmers to grow more, that gets affected. And dream of the children, they want to study, they want to become scientists, they do want to serve others. All these become a waste. You will not be able to achieve anything. War stands there as a big hurdle. Wars don't allow countries to progress at all. There will be dearth of money, dearth of food, and dearth of labor, farmers, and everything will be chaos and confusion. So, peace is very important from the viewpoint of global security. Peace is very important. Peace has to prevail. If the world has to march forward, there should be peace. Absolute peace. Every country should feel secure in the new setup. No doubt, thanks to the United Nations, it has done enough work. But still, it could have done much more work. That we will see in the next chapter when we discuss about United Nations. After 1963, what happened? 1945 to 1963. 1963 onwards, there was Cold War between America and Russia. So they had to sit and work out agreements. USA and USSR, they signed many agreements. Partial test ban treaty was signed. It is known as PTBT. That means nuclear bombs, even if you have, you cannot have tryouts. You cannot try nuclear bombs. Partial test ban. Even if you have to try, you have to inform your rival nation. Keep them informed. Take their consent. Then only you can. So that is partial test ban treaty. Then came comprehensive nuclear ban treaty. That is known as CTBT. Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT. PTBT, next one is CTBT. Then came SALT, Strategic Arms Limitation Act, and those were talks actually, so it was known as SALT, S-A-L-T, Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. So major countries of the world, they sat and discussed most of these problems. But still, whatever was happening was short of whatever was expected. Desired effects were not there. Then India somehow tried to find a way out. So this definitive destruction has to be stopped. What is definitive destruction? If countries are allowed to pile up nuclear weapons, then definitely there will be destruction at some stage. And if a war takes place, the whole world gets destroyed. The war will not conclude with a battle or a war in a specified local area. It will just spread to the entire world and it will be total annihilation. Total annihilation. This had to be understood by everyone. So this is all about arms race. Even now, the arms race is there. China, North Korea, Russia, America, Iran, many of these countries, they are in the arms race. They want to become superpowers in their respective areas all over the entire globe. So, an answer, a solution, a very difficult task has to be found. Then the last part is economic inequality. We understood the world got deformed badly from the economic point of view. The World War resulted in some countries having wealth and other countries becoming total sufferers. Actually, we have to make two aspects of the world economy major holders of economic instability. One is colonialism. 200 to 300 years, some of the countries were absolutely exploited and wealth was taken away to the powers which were holding other countries at ransom. So colonialism, the other is imperialism. Countries wanted to spread over larger areas, take over other countries, smaller powers, smaller nations, and build up their empire. This too was a major threat to the world economy. So, a historical gift, we can say economic inequality is a historical gift of colonialism and imperialism. So all these countries which were colonial powers, they have to be pulled up for whatever crime they have done. It's a huge crime. They might have declared independence. But what about the wealth they had taken already over 200, 300 years and made their country very poor? India is the best example. A rich country like India started bleeding and bleeding. And as we got independence, what were we? Like crores of people were dying of hunger. They did not have food. The country had not been developed by the British at all. Even if they had developed the country, it was for their own good. European countries established colonies, I told you, mainly in Africa, Asia and Latin America. Now, developing countries have a lot of hurdles. They might have got independence, but that itself is not enough. They have a lot of hurdles. Say in the fields of science, technology, health, social programs, agriculture, education, and health aspects. These countries which had got freedom, which had just become free, they were facing lots and lots of problems. Without capital, you cannot build up a nation at all. And where is the capital? But USA and USSR helped some of the countries by way of loans, by way of money being given, monetary help, but it was all with a viewpoint of building up their bloc. Building up their bloc, and they have to become strong. So poverty was a major problem that the world was facing. And countries like India, they started advocating the need for helping the poor countries with monetary help. Let the rich countries help the poor countries. Give them loans, give them expertise, give them the needed scientific help in order to improve themselves. Non-aligned policy that was framed by India, Egypt, and Yugoslavia. Jawaharlal Nehru of India, Abdul Nasser of Egypt, and Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia. There were three star politicians, statesmen who sat together and came out with the non-aligned policy. Let countries which do not like to join neither Russian bloc nor the American bloc come here. We will form a separate third bloc. A third bloc, we will keep equal distance from both these blocs, and we will try to play a major role in the world economy. That was the idea. So protecting self-respect. If you join any bloc, once again you become a follower there. You will be under their clutches. Let us stand separate. Let us maintain equal distance from both these blocs. And monetary help can be given to all the third world countries. First world, second world, USSR and USA, these two blocs. After leaving out these two blocs, countries that are left out, they are the third world countries. They needed help. Their situation was miserable. So, insistence was made that the third world countries have to be helped, enabled to stand on their own by advanced countries. So, things happened to a certain extent. By around 1985, 1990, open economy, the idea of open economy, you have to keep your economy transparent, open economy, and globalization. Take interest in the global affairs. Try to bring about peace everywhere, maintain peace. All these ideas, they found a lot of significance. And it was also true because of industrialization everywhere, pollution started increasing. Today, pollution or the damage to the natural wealth of the world has turned to be another major area of conflict. Another major area where the humanity will have to pay a lot of interest and see that problems stand solved. But this much is true, India had its own stand throughout. We did not become partners of either blocs of the world, either the USSR bloc or the USA bloc. We did the best we can to bring about understanding and maintain peace in the global phenomenon. Thank you.